Hello, booktubers and super friends. So, back with Jennie.
Hello.
Nearby.
Ow.
Because talk about some sword and sorcery, because today is publication day for a novel I've been curious about since I first glimpsed it. So that is Red Sonja Consumed. Red Sonja Consumed by Gail Simone. And I don't usually do like advanced copies and that, but I was quite keen to get a handle on this one. So I've read an ARC and it's fantastic. So short thing is, it's really good fantasy book, and you don't need to know anything about the characters' previous incarnations. In fact, that might almost be a benefit. So I'm going to tell you about it, but I am going to talk about those very previous incarnations first. And along the way, we'll see if Dr. Jennie, who I think it's fair to say likes fantasy, but doesn't necessarily like sword and sorcery.
I like some sword and sorcery.
Yes.
I disapprove of things where women aren't allowed to wear proper armour.
Well, we'll get to that.
And
we'll
I
get to that.
disapprove even more of things where women are allowed only to wear bikinis.
Yeah,
But, you know, carry on.
Yeah, so well, let's see if we can negotiate the choppy waters of that sort of thing. So, why I'm interested in the book, which by now has probably got a picture inserted behind me. I like Gail Simone as a writer. Read a lot of her comics. So this is her first novel of words. She's written tons of comics, including comics about Red Sonja, but I've also really enjoyed her Secret Six series, her Wonder Woman series. And I like the character too. So Red Sonja is a character who really first appeared in comics and has had a long comics history. But this is billed as a reimagining of Red Sonja. So like I say, new readers start here. Doesn't matter at all if you don't like or care about any of this, but it's I think it's interesting. I did some reading to limber up and remembering when I first came across the character, which was in comics. Comics about Conan the Barbarian. So Conan, originally a character in pulp magazines in the 30s, created by a writer called Robert E. Howard, was adapted into comics form in the mid-1970s, which I came across in British black and white reprints. So basically, the comic had been going for, I guess, a couple of years, because we're up to issue, I think 23. And the writer, Roy Thomas, wanted a female character to interact with Conan. So Roy Thomas looked back to other stories by Robert E. Howard. So Robert E. Howard wrote the Conan stories, also wrote all sorts of other pulp fiction, and that included historicals, and one of those historical stories was one called The Shadow of the Vulture, set in the 1500s when Austria is being besieged by the Ottoman Empire, and has two lead characters. There's a sort of slightly aging, slightly sottish male warrior called von Kalmbach, prone to drinking so much that he's like crying into his long moustaches. We've all been there. And Red Sonja with a Y, Red Sonja of Rogatino, is like a female warrior involved in the battle, and she's great. She wears a sort of patchwork assembly of armour. She's brilliant in battles and stuff, and she's quite dismissive of this von Kalmbach guy to start with, but then she obviously feels an attachment to him because they end up basically as allies. So there was this Red Sonja with a Y character. Roy Thomas thought, yes, she'll be ideal for what I'm looking for to insert into the Conan stories. So the first thing he did was to adapt The Shadow of the Vulture to make it into a Conan story. So von Kalmak, no more long moustaches, no more drunken weeping, becomes Conan, and there's a story which is fine. I would say it's not one of the best of the early Conan comics, but we do begin to see for the first time Red Sonja with a J appearing as a character in the Hyborian Age. I should say these sword and sorcery stories don't take place in historical time, they take place in an imaginary prehistory, basically fantasy milieu where magic works and stuff like that. So that people turning historical stories into these stories have to insert a little bit of magic too. So there's Red Sonja in that first story, which is fine, but it's a bit brief. Roy Thomas says if he had his life over again, he probably would have done it over 2 issues. Then you get brand new stuff, The Song of Red Sonja, with fabulous artwork by Barry Smith. So now we get Sonja. So we see the people of barbaric tongues, like Conan himself, still pronounce it with a Y. They're chanting Sonja, 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 because they can't do the demi-vowels, I believe they're called. Or demi-consonants, I don't know. Of the Hyrcanian language. In fact, I had a colleague at work who was Sonja with a Y, and I always was tempted to be chanting Sonja, Sonja whenever I saw her, but fortunately resisted the temptation.
Yes. Very wise, very wise.
So this story was awesome, character well received, and would appear in Conan comics on and off, as a sort of recurring character. Some of those are really good. I think one of my favourite Conan comics of all is one where one of the Conan the King series, where he's now middle-aged, he's got to run a country, he's married with children, and Sonja appears, still a footloose adventurer.
She got any more clothes on?
Never mind about the clothes for now.
Soft.
And yes, they have a little adventure, and that's really good. So then she had her own comic for a while, artist called Frank Thorne, and that's really where this chainmail bikini appears. Beloved by cosplayers, by the emerges from the fever dreams of fan fiction basements across the world, and I'd say there are 3 things. So, yes, if you just Googled you thought, there's this new fantasy book everybody's talking about. Red Sonja, character, she's already existing, and you'd see all these images of woman in chainmail bikini. So is it like a sort of an animated pin-up character? What's it all about? I'll say 3 things, because I come to praise the bikini, not to bury it. One is, we're talking about pulp fiction, the enduring legacy of those pulp magazines in the 30s, which were spicy and sexy. If you look at the artwork, cover artwork by Margaret Brundage, for instance, that was part of the appeal, rightly or wrongly, and you could see that as in a sort of a tradition of art as well. I think Thomas at his channel Art and Lit Matters has looked into this with lots of lovely visuals. That's one thing. Also, comics. She's a comics character, Comics like superheroes, for instance. I would argue the characters tend to be in effect naked, because say I will be a superhero, I'm going to wear tight clothing like lycra. It's not going to delineate every muscle, tendon, etc. on your body, because that doesn't happen in real life. So in effect, it's a sort of by sleight of hand. Comics have characters, their physicality is part of their presentation on the page. So what do you expect? And finally, sword and sorcery itself celebrates physicality through the battling, through the the sort of potency in all its ways. However, in this book, which was what we're talking about, you don't have to get into any bikinis or not. She's never described as wearing a chainmail bikini. It's alluded to that her armour might be somewhat light for the climate, and there's also talk of how, because by this stage in her life she's like a legendary warrior, there are all these stories about her, many apocryphal. She's depicted as everything from a saint to a sort of devil spawn, and part of that, there have been like burlesques and pantomimes of her with actors with like pneumatic bosoms stuck on and stuff like that. So it's sort of a little bit like, yeah, okay, you can take it any way you want, because these days you don't get covers like this. There were some prose stories about Red Sonja in the 1980s with paintings by Boris. You get a semi-abstract cover with a sword hilt and a hank of hair. So all you know from that is she has a sword and she has red hair.
Well, she has a hank of red hair.
Yes, she's just hanging.
She just hangs it on her sword
Here's
hilt.
the hair that you've heard about. And the sword.
And here's my sword.
Better not complain about it, because she hasn't just been a supporting character to Conan the Barbarian, who is never mentioned in the novel. You don't need to get into Conan either if you don't want to. She's a bit like a sort of star football player in that she's moved from comics company to comics company and been in all sorts of stories. Like I say, some of those have been written by Gail Simone, usually sort of series that then get published as trade paperbacks. For some reason, tons of them are on Kindle Unlimited, so there's a sort of Sonja landfill you can dig into.
Shall I go?
Yeah, okay, the doorbell's rung.
I'm going.
So if this is the Sonjagram I ordered, it'll be a young lady wearing a chainmail bikini.
Let's hope not. She'll get short.
And we're back. So through her comics career, she's become a kind of eternal multiverse travelling character, a bit like Doctor Who or Jerry Cornelius, who can sort of appear in virtually any kind of story, any time, any sort of environment, often teaming up with other characters as well. I mean, I remember her teaming up with Spider-Man back in the Marvel days, but I've seen her teamed up with Tarzan, for instance. She spends a lot of time hanging out with Vampirella.
Who wouldn't?
Give
them the chance.
Exactly, and they're, the two frenemies. They might show up in 1920s with gangsters or whatever. In fact, the one thing I've been enjoying recently, Vampirella and Red Sonja meet Betty and Veronica in Riverdale from the Archieverse.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
And yes, Red Sonja becomes, to work off some of her physicality, a football star for playing for the high school team.
Woohoo!
So clearly the stories have drifted somewhat from Robert E. Howard's Red Sonja of Rogatino firing a cannon on the walls of Vienna while it's besieged by the Ottomans. That brings us by a commodious vicus of recirculation back to the book. Just to reiterate, no need to know any of the baggage. You can just enjoy it as a novel. And I think it's great. It's full of action. To me, it reads like modern fantasy. But it's also sword and sorcery as well. So you haven't got, it's kind of epic, but you haven't got like a cast of thousands. And yes, you're mainly following Sonja, but there's lots of other well-developed characters as well. So this is Red Sonja, the greatest warrior of the age, it seems. Legendary, she-devil, some would call her. She doesn't necessarily own that herself, but... and she's a person who does what she wants. She eats what she wants. If she wants to have sexual encounters, she will have them. Interestingly, that didn't happen back in the 80s.
What, sex?
Yeah, yes, for all sorts of reasons, including in the construction within the series of 6 novels by David C. Smith and Richard L. Tierney. There's some kind of vow to a goddess that she will never get with anyone in the squelchy sense unless they best her in battle. And no one can best her in battle. So that takes sex off the table.
In the squelchy
We've
sense.
forgotten all about that now. Now she, like I say, Sonja does what she wants, but with enough self-awareness to see that this has consequences and comes at a cost, sometimes for herself, sometimes from the people she's with. So there's some melancholy as well. There's some, not introspection exactly, but there's a well-developed character and a fantastic sword and sorcery type fantasy plot. The horror elements are quite horrific. The action is good. The world building's good. Some of us have grown up with the landscape of the Hyborian Age kind of baked into us, but you don't need to know any of that either.
So when you die, if they cut you open, will you find the words Hyborian Age written on your heart?
Well, let's hope so. So perhaps not a perfect novel. Sometimes the kind of jump cuts between timelines and different people make it a little bit choppy for me. I thought the life stage that Sonja's at, she's this fearsome warrior with a great backstory we don't know about, but she has apparently including being a general, and yet she's seems to be this completely impulsive, carefree character, so it didn't quite gel for me, that. Plus it does have origin story stuff, like how she becomes that way. And going back to the Robert E. Howard story, Red Sonja of Rogatino just appears. You don't get what her childhood's like or how she came to know how to fight and stuff like that. But those are just my little niggles, and I'd call it sword and sorcery with a heart, stirring action. The horror is horrific. Can Gail Simone write novels? Yes, she can. That's all I'm going to say. So, bikinis aside, assuming it's free for you in our family Kindle what's name, would you try this?
Ooh, now there's a tricky one. I possibly would. As I'm getting little joy out of what I've chosen to read in the last certainly 3 months. I could do with something completely out of my wheelhouse.
No, right, yeah.
So maybe I would.
Well, if
Who can say?
if that happens, well, whatever occurs, if you DNF it after 1 page or if you read the whole thing, we'll find out another time.
We will.
So, Consumed by Gail Simone, published today. Red Sonja is good. That's what I say.
And the highest accolade Mr. Roy can give to any book. It
is
good.
Good. Yes. All right. Cheers, Chiefs.
Bye.